Hello and welcome back to the channel. First things first, as I like to start off with first things first, but life has once again managed to find a way of interrupting what we like to do on this channel, which is talk about the NFL, because the government sent more paperwork for me to fill out, which is why I haven't been able to keep an eye on every single headline that's gone out with the NFL today, as I usually like to do, and also means I haven't had enough time to, come up with enough topics to talk about, which is why I'm only doing 4 today. Well, I like to do 5. I can't remember how many times I've actually managed to rattle off 5, but I like to do 5, but I haven't managed to do that yet. And also in terms of timeline, I like to get things out by 5 p.m. Eastern. It is now 20 to 7. So that just gives you a rough idea of how much I've had to just take a little bit of a... This stuff has had to take a bit of a backseat for today. But with that being said, let's dive on right into it. Preseason is officially in the books. All that's left to do is for teams to trim their rosters down from 90 to 53. As players there have been gradual cuts and waves and all that sort of stuff over the course of the day. There have been some trades as well. So it's not going to be a finite process. It's not going to be every single team releases their 53-man bang on. It will be gradually done. You can probably work out where some players are going to go. But for the most part, it is going to be one big announcement. But some things will trickle out. One player who is not going to be cut though, and I must admit, I've adapted to the times. I've now got my phone, which for some reason has its light on. I shall turn that off, save battery. I've got my phone now rather than the clipboard, just because I've taken some screenshots of what I wanted to talk about today. Why is this cowling over there? I should have done this before I started. There we go, that's a little bit better. Right, let's start off with someone who isn't going to get cut and is more than likely, well, he is going to start because he's been announced as it. Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dov Kleinman, the noted NFL tweeter, or Xer, whatever phrase you want to use for Twitter nowadays. I still call it Twitter, and honestly, I'm not going to change that. Posted Baker Mayfield's stats for this preseason, and they're actually pretty interesting. 135.4 QB rating, 14 of 15 passing, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 93.3% completion rate, 7 yards per attempt. You might want to think that's a good thing. I think it's a bad thing if I'm being honest. I've spoken about the Tampa quarterback competition last week, but I think with that, it might start to lull things into a false sense of security. And honestly, whilst it might look good for the Buccaneers to have a good Baker Mayfield, I just don't think it's the best for them. I just don't think it's the best for them long term. I don't think that they are going to be a competitive team. So all you are doing is Baker Mayfield, if he is the man that just drags them on, like Russell Wilson was for all those years, and his Baker Mayfield's predecessor in Tampa Bay, Tom Brady. It was a very bad team in his last season. It was the only reason they got to where they did and won the division was solely because of Tom Brady. We don't like to say the football or sports are all down to one man, but I think it's pretty fair to say that Tom Brady was a one-man team for the Buccaneers last year. But if Baker Mayfield, and I'm not going to say he's going to reproduce exactly that, no one is going to be able to go through the season with 93.3% completion rate. It's impossible. But if he is that good, or at least half that good, or three quarters, whatever math you want to use, but if he is able to, like Tom Brady, keep bringing them up, I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing for the Buccaneers, because I think that they should be in the mode of trying to find a younger franchise quarterback. That's why if you wanted to lean towards Kyle Trask, fine. If you wanted to, focus all on the quarterback draft classes coming out next year in 2024, led by Caleb Williams and Drake May, but there will always be that one player or two players that just come out of nowhere that no one's really thinking of. I go back. Who was really talking about Cam Newton in 2010 when he did his thing with Auburn? Who projected ahead of the season that was going to happen? My knowledge of college football at that time wasn't great, but I'd probably guess no one, just because of where Auburn were at that time. So there will always be that one. So I think they should be looking for that. And if Baker Mayfield is performing this well, and again keeps dragging them up, that's going to put them towards the middle of the pack. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing for them to do. I'm not going to advocate for teams to tank. I don't advocate for it, but I think it is obvious that there are some teams who would benefit from it. And I think the Buccaneers are one of them because they've had Kyle Trask for this amount of time, and obviously, whilst Tom Brady was never going to give up that spot easily, the fact that he hasn't been able to beat out Baker Mayfield, who after the last couple of years has shown that he definitely was not worth the number one pick in the draft, and is probably likely to be a backup rather than a franchise starter. There are always these quarterbacks that suffer a renaissance. The best argument is, or the most obvious one, or the most recent, is Ryan Tannehill. Or Drew Brees when he went to the Saints after his time with the Chargers and everything. There are always these renaissance, but I don't think it's going to be Baker Mayfield. I think he is settled in as a backup in the NFL. So if he is going to bring the Buccaneers up, that puts them towards the middle of the pack. That means they're going to have to either trade down for it, or they are going to miss the quarterback class. And I think, again, whilst quarterbacks in the draft are never an exact thing, but if the belief is that who is coming out are going to be franchise quarterbacks and are the future and are 10-year, 12, 15-year guys, then I don't know whether or not playing Baker Mayfield and having him as the, and even if he's not bad, but he proves to be a viable option, I just don't know if long term that's the best thing for the Buccaneers to have. I think they need a total reset. They are going through a bit of a reset with the players that they've lost and the players they're bringing in. I just don't know if Baker Mayfield is the man that you want to have guiding through that. So, whilst it might look good for the Buccaneers to have a good quarterback and someone who can at least keep them competitive in games, if they're, I'm not going to say too competitive, but if they win too many games by accident or however you wish to phrase that, then they are going to luck themselves out of a pretty decent quarterback prospect coming out. I still think that the team going to be drafting first are the Arizona Cardinals, just because they have their pick, and I don't think they're going to be very good. And they have the Houston Texans pick, and the Houston Texans, whilst I think they have got better, have they got enough, and are they good enough to take a big step forward? I don't think so. I think they're going to be near the bottom as well. So there's a chance for them to be picking in the top, Arizona could have 2 picks in the top 5, and you could also trade away or move down however you want. So I think they're in a better position to draft down the bottom than the Buccaneers are. So I just think if Baker Mayfield is good for the Buccaneers, I don't necessarily think that is good for the Buccaneers. That's probably the roundabout TLDR way of saying it, just because of what it's going to look like for their prospects moving forward. Away from the thing. See, I'm struggling to work this, which is why I trust the clip, which is why I go for the clipboard. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN claimed that the Chiefs have a level of interest, as the quote on Twitter says. It's one of those people just reposting what it said. Level of interest in signing free agent quarterback Carson Wentz. I think that's a pretty solid move, because whilst again Carson Wentz has probably gone past his days as a starter, I think when it comes to backups, the backups that the Chiefs have don't necessarily fill me with a lot of confidence. I'm going to bring them up here. The Chiefs quarterback, so it's Patrick Mahomes is obviously, scrolling down, is obviously number 1. Then it's Shane Buechele, I hope I pronounced that right, Blaine Gabbert and Chris Oladokun. You compare those players, like hearing the name Blaine Gabbert just reminds me of I believe it was Chris Carter, but I don't want back I think when he was with the 49ers, it was just Blaine Gabbert stinks, and I think that's fair. So if those are your backup options, and we have seen with Mahomes now, whilst he is very reliable and durable, last season in the playoff just gave you that little bit of inkling that we might need to make sure we're very, very good at backup. You had the story again when he played the Cleveland Browns 2 seasons ago, and Caleb Haney came in and had to effectively rescue them because the Browns gave him a very good game and could very easily have beaten them. Then you go back to last year with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Jacksonville Jaguars in the divisional round of the playoffs, when he got injured and there was this worry of Patrick Mahomes injured. He came back into the game, famously with coming out of the tunnel to grand ovation. There was always the possibility that now what happens if that ankle injury flares up again, and they need someone to fill in for a quarter or a half, or for the rest of the game, depending on when the injury is. And if I was the Chiefs, if I'm looking at who I have in the quarterback room and who is available, like I'm sure there are other free agents available, but I don't know if there's one better, or at least that I would trust more than I would Carson Wentz, who again, whilst his days as a starter have gone, as a backup and someone that you could use in a pinch, given his not only his talent, which again has diminished from his what would have been MVP season, the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and then just the injury has sort of seen him come a bit down. Whilst he's not that, I think he is still a very good person, again, to have in a pinch, and also just having that mindset of, whilst the Kansas City Chiefs as a whole know how to win a Super Bowl and know how to go deep into the playoffs, just having someone who isn't going to be scared of the big moment, like I imagine Chris Oladokun probably would. I say, by the way, I give these lists, I'm recording this before they made the cut, so Chris Oladokun or Shane Buechele or Blaine Gabbert could be cut by the time you're seeing this, so bear that in mind. But Chris Oladokun, if you were to put him in, in a playoff game after Patrick Mahomes gets injured, would you really have a lot of faith in him? Go back to what the 49ers had with Josh Johnson having to take over from Brock Purdy. That's the sort of thing. I argue the 49ers would have won that game if Brock Purdy stayed in. You go to Josh Johnson, all of a sudden that's all kaput. So what do you have that's reliable? Would you rather Chris Oladokun or Shane Buechele or Blaine Gabbert? Or would you have someone who knows how to get there with Carson Wentz, or at least was part of the system and has that bit of a chip on his shoulder than Carson Wentz? I don't think you really would. I think that is probably the best option for them moving forward. Again, how it's going to work, salary demands and what he wants. You'd imagine he's in a stage where he might be getting desperate to get onto an NFL team. So he'll be. I doubt he's going to cost a lot. So they should be able to work salary cap wise and everything. But just in terms of what you have in terms of mentality, I think is the key point to take away from this. What do you have in terms of Carson Wentz's mentality to get through it? I think that's what the best situation is. And also, if you bring him in and have him work under Andy Reid for a year, the rub off from Patrick Mahomes, you may be able to turn that into a draft pick. You look at teams. I look at the Arizona Cardinals. There was talk of them having to start Josh Dobbs this week just because of the quarterback situation that they find themselves in. Again, you wouldn't think that after 6 or 7 weeks of working with Mahomes and Andy Reid and maybe getting a little bit better and learning some new things, that the Arizona Cardinals wouldn't say, rather than Josh Dobbs, given the situation with Kyler Murray, say, I want him instead. Turn that into a 3rd or 4th round or whatever round pick, so you can get something out of him. So I think that will be a very, very smart move if they do decide to take him on. That's a great move for them to take on. That's a funny one. I'll leave that to the end. There's a funny story at the end, which I think you might chuckle at. Ian Rappaport on the Pat McAfee show saying, and I quote from them. I didn't see that. Just because they might paraphrase a few things, but this is the quote that Pat McAfee have given. I don't get the sense that anything is imminent with the 49ers, with Nick Bosa and the 49ers. The 49ers offer is substantial, and I'm confident that the deal will make him the highest paid edge rusher in the NFL. So it sounds as if they are close to a deal, or they are working for a deal. It's not like they're a total standoff, similar to what's happening with the Indianapolis Colts and Jonathan Taylor. There is something there. They're just at a bit of an impasse. It's not that big. Honestly, I will say this. There is a level of, and being honest, as a Steelers fan, I'm quite happy that they haven't worked something out yet, because if he's away from the team, then that means he's not going to be ready for this, not this weekend, but next weekend, or there's a chance he might not be as ready as he probably could be to face us in week 1. That makes the Steelers' job a whole lot easier, because Joey Bosa is the reigning defensive player of the year, and at least in my humble opinion, is the second best defensive player in the NFL behind TJ Watt. I'll make no bones about that. I'm completely biased in that opinion. TJ Watt is number one, Bosa number two in terms of defensive players overall. Watt one, Bosa two, Parsons three. I think that's. No, some other people may have them in different order, but I don't think I'm in all objectivity as well. If a neutral were to put those three as their order, I don't think you get many complaints. But Nick Bosa is a player who can make an impact, so I'm happy that they're moving away. But on the general point, and again, looking with all objectivity, the 49ers need to pay Nick Bosa because he is that player. He is I don't think it's impossible for him to go on and win Defensive Player of the Year this year. I don't think it's impossible for him to go and break or equal TJ Watt's sack record. And also Michael Strahan's record for most sacks in the season. He is that special. And again, the 49ers, given the competitiveness of the NFC, at the top at least, the NFC isn't as deep competitively as the AFC is, where you can see with the AFC, it's the Chiefs and the Bengals and arguably the Bills and the Jets and some will say the Dolphins and some will say the Broncos if Sean Payne can get them sorted out, and the Chargers if they can get out of their own way, and the Ravens with them. There's a lot of teams that you could legitimately say have a chance to at least make the AFC Championship game. In the NFC, it's the Eagles and the 49ers way, way above the rest of the team. So whilst they may be able to get away and win the division, win the NFC West without Nick Bosa, if you're looking for playoff seedings and being able to maybe catch the Philadelphia Eagles and knock them off top spot, his impact might make a difference. Whilst they might be able to win the NFC West by 2 or 3 games, they could lose the NFC number 1 seed by 1 game to the Eagles, and it could be the Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa is the player that can make that 1 game difference. So the 49ers, it is just simple, but I don't see what the rationale is for holding on to him. It's not like that. There's nothing for them. There's nothing for them to argue. Like we saw with the Lamar Jackson, the Ravens thing. They could hold the injury thing against him and say, "Oh, look at what happened the past 2 seasons. You can do this, you can do that." The Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott. We have seen. Last year he got injured and he was out for the whole of or the majority of 2020. So he is an injury risk. That is something that the Cowboys can say, no, we don't want to give you X amount. We'll give you 80% of X amount because of your injury history. When it comes to Nick Bosa, he is that guy that can, as I said, win games on his own. Well, not on his own because he is part of an incredible defense, but he is someone who can make that much of a difference to a team. And in a division and in a conference rather like the NFC, he is someone that can very easily make a difference. And again, if it comes to the Super Bowl, if you're going up against Mahomes or Burrow or any star quarterback, he could be a great equalizer and neutralizer for that. So there is no rationale for the San Francisco 49ers not to pay Nick Bosa. They need to pay Nick Bosa as soon as possible, just because, again, whilst he's probably keeping himself in a decent shape, but if he's not getting himself in good enough shape, that could cost them the first couple of games of the season, games they won't get back. All of a sudden, whilst he could be great for the rest of the season, those 2 games, you need him. You need him in the building. You need him as best and as fit as you possibly can, in order to stand a chance, or at least a better chance, of winning the NFC and maybe even going on to win the Super Bowl. So you need him at his peak 100% the whole way through the season. Now, as I said, one kind of funny one, and it's one of these things you wonder what was going through the NFL's mind when they came up with this. You understand what they were doing, but there's just one thing like, hang on, we should have seen this coming a mile away. And this is that the WWE today announced their partnership with the NFL to release legacy titles for all 32 teams. This has been something that's been going on through a lot of sports for pretty much the best part of a decade now. Whenever a team in North America, and I think around the rest of the world, if it's a big name, if they win their league or they win their championship, the WWE will send a custom WWE Championship belt with the custom nameplates that will feature the team's logo and all that sort of stuff. So obviously this is just a continuation of that with the NFL, and now it's a partnership with the NFL. And they had a and as I said, they released legacy titles for all 32 teams. However, for those of you who are aware of what goes on, with other sports and what goes on with wrestling, one slight problem with that: the Jacksonville Jaguars are owned by the Khans, and the Khans run AEW. So, as someone pointed out, at WrestleOps on Twitter, the Jacksonville Jaguars legacy title as of now has been removed from WWE's official shop. The section only now shows 31 teams instead of 32. Again, that is the thing. Someone somewhere along the line must have come up with, okay, we're sending all these things. How did no one at any point come up with the idea of, should we be sending WWE merchandise or trying to sell it or brand it with the name of a team who is owned by another wrestling company? Someone somewhere should get. I'm not saying should be fired for it, but someone needs to just be brought in and say, oi, let's use some common sense here. Again, it's not going to be a big deal breaker or anything major for the NFL. I just think it's quite funny that they go through all this. They probably had this planned, went through like how much our team's going to get as in terms of revenue for it, or how much is going to go to all sort of things, all the designs, and all that. At no point during this process someone said, should we be doing one for the Jaguars given that they're owned by a rival company? Just passed everyone by. The only way I could, I'm trying to think if there's an equivalent, but you go back. I think Ted Turner owned I don't know if he still does, but I know he did own the Atlanta Braves in the 1990s. And you think when they won their World Series, could you imagine WWE sending a championship belt? Well, I can imagine them sending a championship belt. Again, just because of the Monday Night Wars and everything that was going on. But can you imagine Ted Turner and the Braves accepting that when Ted Turner had his roles in WCW? I don't think so. Just a funny thing because. Just a funny thing because because this is going to be a pretty sad day for a lot of people in the NFL. So with this being their last day on an NFL roster, so I thought I'd try and cheer things up a little bit, or at least end on high on a funny note on what is going to be a very sad day. And I was saying this to my wife. She was saying, she just feels so bad for all the players that are that played in the NFL and did all this and they're never going to play again. And I did sort of say, and I think this is something for everyone to keep in mind. I've seen a couple of posts. Don't mock or be kind to these players as they get cut. This is the end of their dream and everything along those lines. I get the sentiment, but let's not forget there is the USFL and the XFL. There is a chance for them to, there is a chance for a second chance for them to make it in the NFL. We have seen a couple of players make the moves from the spring leagues to the NFL, back to the NFL. So whilst it is again a sad day, just remember that this may not totally be the end of the road for them. There will be options for them. They may decide to go back to college and be an assistant coach and move their way up. They may go to high school. So it's not totally the end of the world for them. Some of them it might end up being, but again, there are a lot of second chances out there for them to work on, and possibly get signed further down the line. So hope that's a positive note to end on. This brings us to the end of today's episode. Don't forget, all the details are in my socials. All the details on my socials are in the description below. Feel free to like, feel free to subscribe on the channel, and of course give me a follow on all those platforms. Feel free to reach out if there's any topics you want to have covered or anything along those lines. As I say, I'm always open for any debate as long as it's reasonable. So that's really it. So until hopefully tomorrow, we hope to keep this a daily thing. But as I say, life finds a way. But until then, or until next time, at least I'll keep it till then. And until next time, you guys take care.